Welcome to Clubby. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I am your architect of business growth. I work with you to amplify the scale of your company. Today, we're going to be talking about it's time to play offense. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Boulay Group, CPA and advisors, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Minnesota Sales, a sales acceleration firm, and the Network Connect, a catalytic gateway for growing your company. A reminder to subscribe and like our channel. Clubby needs your support. So take a few moments here. I'll pause, I'll wait for you. Click on the subscribe button below. It's right down below the video. It's going to help us deliver better content to you, our wonderful audience, as well as add more value to our sponsors. So again, hit the subscribe and like buttons below. All right, with that, I would like to introduce today's speaker. Todd Eberhardt is founder and CEO of Dynasty Leadership Consulting. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'd love to have you here. And for those of you who would like to connect up with Todd after our event today, his contact info will be in the comments field below, but it's Todd at dynastylc.com with the LC standing for Leadership Consulting. Also, in addition to putting comments or questions there, we'll have a drawing, which we will tell you about in a moment. All right, Todd, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, the firm, and the different things you're up to.
So I'll give you the short history. Serial entrepreneur. So Dynasty is actually my sixth company. I've had five other ones that were mainly in the tech world space, all bootstrapped. So not a big, heavily funded item, and not the sexy kind of business. This is kind of that keep things running in the back office type of things. But they're all great businesses. I've had experience growing them. I've had great partners throughout the years. I've sold to private equity. I have sold to the management teams. I've even had to shut a company down because it wasn't working. So I've got a broad variety of experiences in that. And from a dynasty world, what I do now is it's actually very simple. I only do two things. I coach CEOs that are in transition, and I lead strategic planning for companies that want to grow through innovation. So that's kind of the nutshell of the professional world. My personal world's actually been a lot, I would say even more simple lately, just because we're all currently staying at home right now. So it's been a mix of dog walking, family dinners, and teaching my in-laws how to use Zoom.
All right. And how's that last one going?
Surprisingly, they took to it very quickly, and it's a double-edged sword, right? So then you teach them how to use something, and they really want to be on with you like on a regular basis, probably more than we can all. We just don't have enough updates from a family perspective. So we got to be careful how we administer.
So you kept your spot as a favorite son-in-law through this. It didn't damage the relationship?
I don't know what ranking I have with a family right now, but I would say that they're happy they can connect because we have family all over the country.
Right. Well, again, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it very much.
Absolutely.
So audience out there, before we get to our event, just a reminder that you can participate. Today's hashtag is hashtag CEO Coach. Put in that into the comment field, submit a question if you'd like. We're going to have three winners who are going to get an ideal client analysis from Todd. This is a $500 value. You can find out where you can make the most profits and where you may be pouring money down the drain in your business. This is recommended for business and sales leaders who have an active sales force. So again, that's hashtag CEO Coach. And maybe before we even go into our questions, Todd, maybe you could clarify in your mind and help our audience out a little bit. What does active sales force mean?
So active sales force means, so if your only activity was through a website or social media or things, that's not what I would consider active sales force. So salespeople that are actively reaching out, generally trying to establish kind of business to business, B2B relationships.
Okay, great. And again, hashtag CEO Coach. Get in the drawing, have Todd assess what you're doing and help you with your business. All right. So, Todd, tell us a little bit about Catapult strategic planning and what is it?
So, strategic planning, and specifically with Catapult, it is the idea of having some forward-looking focus for the business. You know, if you think about what has to happen in a business, you're always charting a course, and generally, unless it's a repeat business from some other time, you're kind of in unknown waters. And you're always kind of examining things as they go. The tricky part is, and you're an entrepreneur, you've done this yourself a number of different times, is that a lot of times we're not 100% sure what's going on. And so we kind of let things work around us. And so we figure just by having a process or a plan, that's enough. The reality is, you need to have a strategy. You need to have something that says, here's what we're going to stand for. Here's where we're willing to commit personnel, capital, resources. And by the way, here's what we're willing to say no to. And those are tough things to do, especially the part about saying no, because if you're kind of a sales driven entrepreneurial leader, or EOS would call it a visionary, you see opportunities everywhere. You're interested, you're excited, that they kind of magnetize towards you, and it's really tricky. So when I work with a business, the catapult planning, the strategic planning we go through is for businesses that are going through innovation or want to go through an innovation. They want to, you might call it a pivot, right? They have to make a change to continue to be viable, to grow. Because if they're seeing their business flatlining, if you're seeing your margins decrease, if you're seeing new competitors, you better have a plan, because it's certainly not going to come from the employees at large. And so that's what we'll spend our time on with Catapult. It's a very specific way of helping businesses focus on growth and then execute on that growth to be able to create innovation.
Well, actually, in the market and economy that we're in right now, almost any business would qualify for that.
There's probably a lot more today. For the last 10 years, we've had such a great growth run. A lot of things would get misconstrued as strategy just because they worked, right? And sometimes it's really hard to figure out, are you really that good, or were we just lucky because everybody was winning,
Right.
So yeah, those are tricky times. These are really a lot of things to think about.
So, for the business owners out there who already use, say, EOS or the Rockefeller Habits or OKRs, Objectives and Key Results, those that were developed by Andy Grove and John Doerr, why would they need Catapult strategic planning?
Yeah, so those are all great processes. They're all great operating systems, right? EOS, it has it right in the acronym. And they do a wonderful job of helping create some structure in a company, especially entrepreneur companies that quite often when you start out, it's a run and gun offense. Things are all over the place and you're just trying to get money in the door. As you get some critical mass, well, now you not only have other employees, but you got a leadership team that really needs to focus. And what I would tell you, it is really hard to run a marathon staring at your shoelaces the whole time. You need to have some outward vision on, why are we doing this? Where are we taking it? And, how are we going to be able to be focused on it? Otherwise, people are off doing all kinds of pet projects that really diffuse the focus of the business. And so an EOS, OKRs, started by Andy Grove, or Rockefeller Habits, those are all fantastic about creating great structure, right? You run a more solid meeting, everybody knows what's expected, you have accountability, you have great metrics. But at some point, you have to have a strategy to say, where is this leading to? What are we going to become? What can we do? And Catapult is that piece that helps put that in. So think of it as the mapping program for your car that gives you that strategic focus on, here's how we get to that point. This is the best route that we're all going to collectively understand and go with. And by having that leadership team all, there should be some way where they can all collaborate and even have some heated arguments about what the best way to do that is. So you get a lot of different points of view. But in the end, having a strategy that you can plug into those metrics, those plans, your rocks, all those big things, that becomes a supercharged way to be able to have great focus on the business. And that's really, whether you're a Netflix or, pick any company that's had to pivot and grow, you're going to bump into some things along the way. Just like you mentioned before, you're talking about the COVID-19. Well, that stopped a lot of businesses in their tracks. You think about some companies out there right now, maybe they had like 2 or 3 key accounts, right? And they were 75% of their business. This is such a gut punch for them if all of a sudden that business just dries up. But do you want to let all of your employees down? Do you want to just kind of sit there and talk and hopefully everything passes and you still got a business to come back to? And I don't agree with that. That's why I like the idea of playing offense. In my experience, and I know you've done so many entrepreneurs through your clubby efforts and the work that you've done coaching yourself. Minnesota entrepreneurs are not great about sitting around, right? We just don't. And so a way to be able to take action in a positive way and have others understand what's important, what do we love, what do we agree on, what are we going to fight for? That's really where this comes in, and it does plug right into the operating systems that they have already. And that's why it tends to work really well for these companies.
Right. So right now, we got a lot of things we're all fighting for. So you bring people together. Sometimes there's agreement, sometimes there's not.
Yeah.
But you put together these planning sessions. What do you expect out of your clients during these sessions?
So I want to think about, in terms of, I get asked a lot about who should show up, who should be there, right? And so the thing that we have to remember, and I got to remember it too, right? Change is hard. We get really comfortable doing things a certain way. And so the idea of redirecting that, for a lot of people, sadly, they would rather be fired than have to change what they do, right? And so learning new things, I fully appreciate it. It's not easy. If you take a look and you asked, I don't know, 100 lifetime fitness people that carry the cards around, right? You'd have a significant number of them that pay their dues and walk around town and couldn't find the kettlebells to save their life, right? They just say, we paid, that should be enough. But I don't want to do the workouts. I'll go in for a sauna, I'll take a whirlpool, and that'll be cool, right? No. You want to get good results, you got to put some work into it. So when I think about what do I expect from them, there's a few things that come up. One, I would invite the executives that have, I'll just say, P&L responsibility. So they see the numbers, or at least have some visibility to understand. So when you can talk about financial concepts, about profitability, about growth, about expenses, you can feel comfortable sharing that information. They can feel comfortable that it's important enough they should take notice and make use of that. So P&L responsibility helps. The next thing I would say is they have the ability to see beyond their own silo. So silo, just picture like the world you work in. I'm in finance, I'm in operations. To be really collaborative on something, you have to be able to see how your part interacts with the other parts. And so if all you can talk about is, closing the books on time, it's going to be short-sighted. And so this whole idea is to stretch them out a little bit. And then the third thing is you got to be willing to contribute. Ask some questions. Getting in heated conflict is not bad. It actually is really important. I want to say it was Henry Ford that came up with the idea when he talked to his board of directors. He says, if we're all in agreement, I don't need all of you here, right? He said, I need other voices to listen to that have different opinions so we can do more interesting things. And that's the same way with a catapult session, is you got to have some conflict and being able to kind of manage through that to come up with a good idea that might have been sitting quietly in the corner. And I've had a lot of clients that have had that. The best idea didn't come from the CEO, which is, exactly what they want, getting some horsepower out of the team. So you think about things that bring them together, through all of this, the idea of ownership and what we're going to do. And it brings up a point. I don't know, Rick, are you familiar with the Ikea effect? I don't want to put you on the spot, but you can say yes or no.
The what?
Ikea effect.
I don't know that I'm enough versed in it to comment, but once you start, I might.
Okay. So if you think about the Ikea effect, so it's the store down by the Mall of America, right? Where everything is flat packed and you got to, screw press board together. The Ikea effect, quite simply, is this, is that if you and I were going to put together a dresser, a children's dresser, and we sat it right next to another dresser of identical quality, piece by piece, right? We would still think that ours is more valuable because we turn the screws, we fit the pieces together, we contributed. When you're doing these strategy sessions, a big part of that is the contribution. You don't have to have all your ideas agreed on, but to be heard, to have engaged, to feel like you contributed to that conversation is huge for anyone when you're doing strategic planning. And that's a tough trick to do. It really is. So you combine that with the idea of innovation and you really start to have some powerful things.
Very good point, and I learned something today. So thank you. And I totally agree with you. By the way,
Thank you.
so talk a little bit about the process in the sense of who does it work for. And I know some of the other work that you do. You talk about ideal clients. So who does this work for, and what's your ideal client?
So, okay, a few different things at work. If we started with who does it work for? And then catch me if I forget a piece in there. I'm happy to come back to it. But so who does it work for? I'll give you a few examples of just my last few catapults of what we did. So I have a client that B2B service company, they do background checks. They're awesome, right? But they're having to go through a pivot because it's a highly competitive market. And what they ended up doing was through the catapult process, and this actually came from one of their other people. It wasn't the main people at the top, but they came up with the idea of what if we took all of our processes that we use to send out to these big companies that do hiring, and we went direct to consumer. We had an application where you could do it right on your phone. You could do it instantly. So if you think of all the gig economy people that are solopreneurs now that want to flash that, hey, we're safe, we're a good bet, those kind of things, opens up a brand new channel, but it's the same system. It's the same information. So their process was the same, right? And their delivery, the way that they put it together and the offering itself was essentially the same, but it's a new customer base. Okay. So that's something that happens. I had another great client, a shipping receiving company. They're actually doing really well through COVID. They have some customers just crushing it right now because a lot of things are shipped direct to home. And they took a look, and this came from one of their salespeople, which is a great thought. And they're taking a look at all the numbers coming in. And she realized, you know what? We're shipping from Minnesota, but we have a ton of clients, in New York and in DC and in Florida that were pushing a bunch out there. So they go through all this, and to be completely candid, I'm asking questions. I'm not coming up with the answers. These people all have great ideas. I'm just kind of helping guide this along.
Mhm.
But what they came up with was essentially a pop-up distribution center. So instead of just shipping from Minnesota, they set up these. So like you remember for Halloween, and they have those pop-up Halloween stores
Yeah,
in that mall space.
absolutely. Yep.
Same concept, right? So just as these things peak, they're able to meet demand and bring it out to them. So those kind of things happen. It's really cool. And I could kind of go on and on about different things where a manufacturing company comes up with its own private label. Of another client that just recently took on, after the catapult, they said, this one employee has had this idea for a while, and they kind of keep bringing it up. We couldn't figure out where to put it. What they did is they actually created a complete separate company and gave this employee ownership. And now they're going to be a vendor for that group, and they all still get to make money together. And each of these is all incrementally more profitable than what they were doing before. So it's a winning hand. And so uh, those are who it works for. So if I had to say, who do I spend my time with? What are the kind of companies?
Mhm.
Um, I've got it down to about 7 questions that I ask to figure, are we going to be a good fit? Are we going to have fun together? Are you going to make some money? Are we going to do that? And so the simple demographics are they usually have at least 50 employees and 10 million in sales. And it's a CEO that's in transition, right? So they see a pivot coming. Maybe they're new to the job in an existing company, or maybe they're taking a look, how do we package this for sale, right? And then I take a look, do they have an appetite for growth? Do they have some kind of secret sauce that makes it better than we're the cheapest kind of conversation? And do they have an eye for a bigger future? So those are all important. And then I ask them a couple of very simple, but what I consider psychographic questions, which is, it's a fancy way of saying, what are the stories we tell ourselves about who we are? And so I'll ask them, I say, what's your history with coaches and consultants for the business? And tell me about your last vacation. So when I get those questions, I'll have a pretty good idea of exactly, are we going to have a great time together? Or should I be thinking about making a referral to someone else? Because I do that a lot as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know because you've done that with me, and I've been very much appreciative of that. So thank you. So in our talks about your business and the projects that you've worked on and the companies you try to help, you've mentioned 5x and trying to grow profits 5 times. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So 5x is a concept that helps make it unique. And the reason that I went for that is in my other companies, both in my own experience running my companies, but also in one of my other companies, we had teams of people on the phone and traveling the country. And we had this amazing backstage experience where we got to interview 7,000 entrepreneurial led companies across the country. And we learned a bunch of stuff from them. So when you hold businesses side by side, you get a great comparative value. And what we found is there's companies that do certain things really well, and there are those that struggle. And so we took a look at the ones and how do you compare it? And what we found are patterns. And from those patterns, we created processes. And one of those is Catapult. And inside of that is the 5X. 5X quite simply means 5X growth in profits over the next 5 years. So that's the short answer. The reason that becomes important is you could probably double your business just through brute force. You could work people harder. You could spend longer hours. You could just push them. The problem is there's no fun, there's no passion, and it's unsustainable. And so what I've learned over time through all these experiences is if we want to take something and magnify it quite a bit, you can't do it by more of the same. You have to fundamentally change. You have to innovate. And so we get them in a process of what could we become? How do we stretch our minds? And as I go through that, 5X, 5 years is about the maximum I've found that entrepreneurs can have a line of sight and can picture what that vision looks like with some clarity. I've also learned, and you could probably speak to this as well, Rick, but 3 to 5 years is about the holding time of a portfolio company in private equity. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
So if nothing else, it's good practice. If down the road there's going to be a sale, it's a good thing to think of more than just tomorrow. How do we think of something with some visibility? So all those things that I had mentioned before about those innovations that these companies, my clients, came up with, those were all done in the later stages of that Catapult 5X. They had to think of something much bigger, but it couldn't be something we're going to just make it happen tomorrow. It's too big a process. So that's where the 5X comes in.
Sure. And for you folks out there who are not math majors, and I know there's a lot of you out there, 5X in 5 years is a 38% compounded growth rate. So that's outstanding. And if you can get your clients close to that, that's wonderful news, Todd.
Yeah.
Hey, just a reminder to everybody out there, hashtag CEO Coach, get in the drawing to have Todd work with you and your sales team and figure out how you can grow the business faster and more profitably. But then also take a moment here to hit the subscribe and like button. That will help us deliver better content to you as well as support our sponsors. So again, hit the subscribe and like button. All right. You've been kind of framing up what you do. We've talked a little bit about the goals, 5X in 5 years. You've seen a lot of different things over the years. Some things have worked, some haven't. Talk a little bit about some of the biggest mistakes that you see business leaders make.
Okay. Okay. So one of the biggest things I see is when the CEO tries to also be the leader. They try to kind of guide the show. And what I've learned over time is this: it is virtually impossible to be both the creator and the critic. So if you're the CEO, to have a quiet voice and just call on people and help guiding the show, that's one thing. But I have yet to find a great entrepreneurial CEO that didn't want to have their voice heard too. They want to be a part of that, and they should be. They should be contributing ideas and impact and all those. And that's typically why it's better, look, if it's not me, pick somebody that you trust that can help guide a good meeting, ask good questions, push people, get that inclusion. But make that happen, because it really is tricky. I have yet to see anyone pull off where they can both be creator and critic. It doesn't typically work. So that's one thing. The other thing that I find is within the excitement, people will jump right away to, if they find the problem, they'll jump right away to solutions, right? We're going to just, I got this, and then try to short circuit it. And when you get a big enough group like that, hopefully you're dealing with things that are meaty enough that it takes a little research. It takes some time to be able to pull at the threads of this thing and see, what are we really opening up? What have we got to work with? and give it some time to unfold. And so rather than jumping right at it, go through some different things. I have a lot of different exercises I bring clients through so we can kind of expand on what that looks like and talk about, you know, what's the competitive landscape here? What are other people doing? What have we tried in the past that if you're a new leader to the company, you might not be aware of? How does all this play out? And by the way, how does that impact where we want to take things going forward? So all those come into play. And then the last thing I would say, the mistakes I've seen is when people stop at that very high level, they come up with this vision, kind of where the company is, and maybe a high level strategy of we're going to be the biggest in the country that, sell widgets. And it's very tough to make that actionable if you stop there, because everybody more than likely will have a bunch of email, some phone calls, a meeting that they missed, and they just jump right back into what it was. So the idea of having to have not only a high level strategy, but you got to back it down into, okay, that's great. What does that mean? What does 5X mean? What does the catapult mean for this year, for this next quarter, for this next month, for this next week? What should I do different tomorrow that's going to help start moving us in that direction? So those would be the main things that I would see, that if you could avoid those when you're driving those with the company, you'll be miles ahead.
Okay. So we got a question from the audience here. Again, reminder, if you have your own question, hashtag CEO Coach. So question is from Eric, longtime listener. Todd, what's the most interesting thing or things that you've learned from your podcast guests?
Wow. Okay. So from the podcast guests, you know, they all have something interesting. So with my podcast, I'm always looking for, what do people do that's interesting and different that I wish I would have known when I was starting and running my businesses. And so I kind of take that as my focal point from doing this. And each one has something to come up with. Paul Annette is probably one of my favorite podcasts that I've done so far, because he has worked with some of the biggest companies in the Twin Cities, but he gets down on a level one-to-one with them through some great questioning and thought pattern that helps them open up. And in return, and this is something I've learned from him, is like, we have to be open. Like when we're coaching, and we got to be open and honest about the fact we're human too. And that breaks down a lot of barriers. I think that's become hugely helpful for me over time.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about what you learned from your podcast folks there. How about through the strategic planning process, the catapult process? What part of that process do you think makes the largest impact?
I would say there's two big pieces I've found that have huge impact. And one of which certainly is the innovations that come out of it. For the companies that are focused on that, they have always been able to come away with something that's unique and different and help them gain an edge in their marketplace. And I think that's huge. The other thing that I found is the idea of, I'll call it inclusion, but that Ikea effect, right? Where they are coming in and they felt heard. And you can hash and thrash all you want through that course in the meeting, but if it doesn't happen there, it's just not going to happen. So the idea that they all feel like they were part of the process and they're galvanized coming out is huge. Dwight Eisenhower was a person, one of our past presidents, great military leader. He said, the plan is worthless. It's the planning that makes all the difference, right? Because the plan is going to change, the first time they encounter the enemy. But the fact that they're all galvanized on the planning and we're in this together means everything.
So what are the ground rules if they're short and you give a sentence or two or three with people about these meetings? What are the ground rules that you lay out so that they feel safe, so they feel heard, so they're willing to take a risk? What do you say to everybody to get their involvement?
So usually we'll start out with a game or two to try and get some of that going, because that creates some conversation, a little laughter and things like that. You are right about the fact, though, that there are going to be people that are quiet voices, and maybe historically within the business, it wasn't always welcome, right? Those things happen. And so we got to get past that. So what I really work for, and we talk about right away, is I'm looking for equal voices, roughly equal time that everybody has, that they're either asking questions, offering ideas, creating something of value to the group where they feel that they have a sense of connection. And then I work as best I can is to create the idea and atmosphere of a game, right? We're doing this for fun. We're doing this for excitement. This is something that, what could we become? And it allows people to let their imaginations run and think of things that they might not have been quite so quick to offer up in maybe an L10 meeting or a quarterly session in the past. Those have huge impact on getting the best and the most horsepower out of people.
All right, great, thank you. So when folks reflect on what they're doing and what they have, how do they know if they have actually a strategic plan?
So yeah, how could you test that, right? Here's what I would look for is, do you have, could you point to some viable opportunities, so some prospects that are out there? Could you point to some that may be great demographically, right? They fit the profile of what you're looking for, but because of the strategy you have set forth, you're willing to not only say no, that we're not going to take them on as a client, we're not even going to hunt for them as a client, but you would be willing to go so far as to refer them to your top competitor. If I knew that for sure, I would know they had a very focused strategy. I would also take a look for, okay, that's great. But if it's business as usual, nothing else changes. So I would look for things along the line of, what is changing in the business on a day-to-day basis? What would the employees notice? That's a change. What would your clients notice? That's a change. How does that all kind of fit together within the strategy? And then the last thing I would look for is, within the strategy, what meaningful connections do you have for your best past client success? And I think of that kind of in a triangle fashion. So if you had, at the top of the triangle is customers, and then you'd have the offerings, products or services, and then you'd have a process. Even though you're going to innovate and change, two of those 3 points should always maintain contact. If you start to change more than one of those 3 points, you're going to have a real problem. So you couldn't be like a transmission shop and then overnight you want to be an online bakery. There's just too many changes, and it's just a forklift. You might as well start a brand new business. So I would say, what are you willing to say no to? What are the daily actions that both employees and your customers would notice? And which of those 3 points of the triangle are you going to maintain some contact with? If you had those things together and we're still pushing forward with the business goals you had, you'd have something really powerful.
Great, great. All right, so we've had a couple of questions from the audience come in, and a reminder: the hashtag is CEO Coach. You can get your name into the drawing as well as ask questions, and then also hit the like and subscribe button. So, question here: we got a couple coming in about COVID. Question: has it been more difficult to get clients to follow through on the actions that you're talking about during the COVID times as compared to pre-COVID?
100%. Yeah. I would say, yeah, it is harder. And the very reason is, we're starting to focus on urgent versus the important. And it's not that they don't have to get taken. Look, if you got to get a PPP loan in the door and you got to be first in line because it's a first come, first served game, yeah, that's got to take priority over your forecasting for a new Q2 budget. Totally get that. But at some point, we got to be able to circle back. And that's really the value of coaching, right? So if you got a fitness trainer, right? They're the ones that can tell when, you're going to throw your back out on that deadlift because you're arching your back instead of the right posture. They're the ones that can help you and look, you're a coach too. You know this. Being able to help get them back on track, even though they kind of stray away. So that 2 steps forward, 1 step back, that's perfectly normal. It's just accelerated right now because we're really in this state of chaos for the moment. But look, we go through plenty of changes, whether it's the .com crash, the financial meltdown, there's always something around the corner. So we just have to be prepared to rise above it. I would totally agree with what Eric posed as a question, though. It's 100% harder right now.
Yeah. So, any tricks you want to share as far as to get people to focus on the important and not the urgent? Do you have anything that's not proprietary to the process that you want to share with our audience?
So really, from a coaching standpoint, when I work with a CEO or work with one of their executives, we really have 3 focal points, 3 main goals that come from a collaborative effort of what's going on, what do the rest of the people think, and what do I believe to be true? What do I really want? So whether it's my sense of timing, my communication with employees, whatever that could be, we still always come back to those 3 points. I'm okay with people breaking off to do some things, but we have to understand, are these things that really move the dial, right? So, the PPP loan, I'll give them a pass on. But we got to come back to some of these important things, because the truth is all the employees are watching. And if you're allowed to goof off and run around and try all these different things, what are they going to think? So having that as a common conversation really helps. And then every piece of conversation that we have ties into, what are the company's goals? How is what you're doing tying to that to move it forward? So that'd be a conversation that moves, from company goals back to rocks into actions. And does that fit? And usually, if they don't get it right away, within about a beat or two, they'll figure out, I was like, yeah, picking out the new logo for business cards, that was fun, but probably not as important as making sure that we had all the salespeople on track for the quarter.
Okay.
So that happens.
Great, great. Well, thank you. So, a question from Sue, another longtime and loyal Clubby listener and participant. As business eases back, will companies continue to rely solely on their websites and online channels to build awareness and visibility and to attract leads?
Uh, Solely on their website. Um,
So it's a kind of, so the questions, I suppose, is, are we now in a digital, low touch society economy? And are they therefore going to be pushing all their marketing and sales stuff that direction?
oh, that's interesting. What I would say from my experience with current clients, I would say a digital strategy is a must right now, especially when everybody is so sequestered that if you don't have one, if you want to reach anyone, you're really going to need one. So I would say that to be true for sure. And then I would fall back on what every online digital strategy company looks at for anything else, and that's an A/B testing. You might have some guesses as to what you think is going to happen, but you know, I have a good friend, Corky Hall, who is a business strategist. He's worked with Ecolab and Rollerblade and Pillsbury, a ton of great names. And he was sitting with the CEO of one of these monster companies, and he said, you know, the only opinion that matters less in this room than yours, Mr. CEO, is mine. And they thought the room was going to explode, but it's true. It doesn't matter what we think. It matters what connects with our clients. And so that's why that A/B testing, try some different things out. And for my money, I would want to reach out to as many thought leaders as I could and find out where are they spending time and how are they reaching out. That would be the best advice I could give.
Well, you definitely walk the talk, because you and I have done A/B testing and worked through that and had a number of conversations about that. So you are practicing what you preach there. So another question from the audience from Aditi: how will the job market look after the COVID-19 crisis? Will skill sets required that are being required, will they change? And will companies be hiring at all? And also curious about marketing and ad spend. So there's a couple of questions wrapped up there. What do you
Hmm.
think the job market's going to look like? Do skills need to change? Hiring, and then lastly, marketing.
So, okay, let's talk about the hiring for a second. I'll kind of speak from perspective of what my clients are seeing right now, because that's the best lens I can use. What I'm seeing is this. They are actually still hiring, but very specifically. So what I find clients doing is they're making strategic trades, right? They're trading up and adding skill set and more firepower because, geez, there's never been a time, certainly in our lifetime, when 20 million people have been on the market all at once. It's a huge change from what we're used to. There were college kids showing up at businesses saying, what does your nap pod look like? I want to know if it's going to be comfortable if I decide to work here. With minuscule unemployment, yeah, that was the way it was going. Now you have 20 million people, and they're like, they got to come with a whole new game plan. You got to show up saying, I am ready to work hard. I am committed to making this happen. And it doesn't mean they shouldn't be a little careful about who they're picking and just throwing darts. Yeah, pick companies that you believe in, and you can say that with some degree of honesty. But I do think we all have to make sure we're up in our game. And I think it's going to be healthy for the economy. I'll tell you what I have seen beyond that is I'm finding companies, so maybe they had 200 employees and they had to do a furlough or a layoff, and now they're down to, let's just say 120. What I found is a couple things. One, they're much more comfortable working remote than they thought they would. And they were some companies that said, that'll never work for us. But now that they don't have a choice, they figured out a way to make it work. So I think there's more flexibility, which is a good thing. The other thing that I found is they have figured out how to get more efficient with the talent they have, and where they needed the 200 bodies before because they were just throwing bodies at it, they can do it. They have new batching process. There's automation. They're spending a ton of money on software and automation right now. So if you're going to learn a skill set, learn about those things. Learn about the digital economy. Your guy Lucas that helped put this whole thing together is doing things I hadn't even heard of. So we were doing the show setup, and he had some great ideas. But that's a whole new skill set. And guys like you and me, Rick, we need people like Lucas helping keep this all online and straight.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one other thing, you talked a little bit about skill sets. Talk a little bit about how you've seen some of your clients react from a marketing perspective. Did they cut their budgets? Did they keep them about the same? My experience has been people have been whacking the marketing budget, and I kind of think that's a little short-sighted, but whatever, people do what they need to do and they make decisions. What have you been seeing with some of your companies?
So, okay, so you're a perfect example, right? You could have waited because Clubby, and I've been to a bunch of them, they're awesome engagement, they're great networking, and the people are always spectacular. We always come away learning something, meeting great new people. You don't have that option right now. And so you're creating this digital world that still, it's not free. It takes money to make it work. It's still an engagement and effort on your part, on your team's part, but you didn't stop it. It was Kirk Terrio that heads up Allied Executives. He wrote something about, what's the flavor, companies stopping sales and marketing. He didn't think it was a good idea either. And I sent him back, and this is, again, it's a Henry Ford quote. And it's saying stopping sales and marketing to save money is no smarter than stopping your watch to save time. It doesn't make sense. And so you need to keep a cadence so people remember who you are. How you adjust that cadence is probably going to be important. When this all started, everybody went very quickly to, we're on your side, we care for you. That warm, we want to make it okay kind of feeling, which is great. Because we were all very nervous. Everybody was scared. We didn't know what to make of all this. That's been going on for a while. Now we're at the point of where they're starting to release, step by step, at least in Minnesota, it's a cadence kind of thing. We got to play offense. We have to go out and start reaching out, because you know what? A lot of things that people kind of spent money blindly on in the past, just as a course of habit, they're rethinking because they probably pulled back their spending. So if you are the Minnesota Twins and you had all these season ticket holders and they were just used to spending the money in their corporate seats and things like that, and they've had to downsize, chances are not only the Twins, but all the rest of us, we're going to have to up our game for people to want to spend that money again. I don't think it's a reason to stop doing it. I do think it's a reason to be mindful of how we do it.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some changes. So as we start to kind of wrap things up, two last questions for you. One kind of a business one, and then another one a little bit more of a personal philosophical thing. So we're talking about shifting and playing offense. We've covered a lot of ground here, but if you're going to leave the audience with kind of one main takeaway from our conversation here today, what would that be?
I go back to the point before, from a strategic standpoint, it's got to be at the leadership level. You've got to create that. This goes back to the thing I said earlier, which is you can't run a marathon staring at your shoelaces. It doesn't work. You have to give people some line of sight. And it also ties into everything that's important to the business. What are the core values? What do we believe in? What are we willing to fight for? What are we willing to say no to? That's a tricky one. Those are the critical things that come into a business. So if we can think about those things, we're all going to be miles ahead. There's no shortage of competition. And there's probably some brand new competitors coming online from, one of the 20 million that are thinking about starting something for themselves. So I would go with that.
All right. And then the philosophical thing, if you look back in your life and all the different things you've learned, if you were to tell kind of an earlier version of yourself what you know today that you wish you would have known back then? Could be personal, could be professional. What might that be?
I would have told myself to reach out more. I, as certainly as an early entrepreneur, I mistakenly believed I had to have all the answers, and it was short-sighted. Um, to be okay not knowing everything, and to ask questions, to reach out for people that you respect. Um, you and I are part of something really cool. I was going to give a shout out to our Breakthrough Hub group. So breakthrough-hub.org is a group that we put together with some of the smartest people I have ever met in my life, some of the best consultants, including Rick Brimacombe here. So what we're doing is putting some things together where we're collaborating and triangulating to give different points of view and helping some very specific companies that are going through some troubled times get back on their feet. That's our donation to them. That's where we put our best skills to work. And so I think all those things are important, but it is that thing of I got to be okay reaching out. I got to be okay saying I don't know everything. And it's led to so many breakthroughs. It's been amazing. And if I would have been a smarter 22, 23, 30-year-old, I would have hopefully listened to that advice.
Yeah. Well, that's actually how you and I have gotten to know each other a lot better and become good friends. And so went from a, intro to something bigger and better. And now we've interacted a number of times at Club E, both in person and now digitally. And I know that you've helped me and you've helped me slash my portfolio company. So Todd, it's been wonderful having you here today. Remind everybody how they can find you.
So the website is dynastylc.com. Dynasty, L is in leadership, C is in consulting.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, or you can reach me by email, todd@dynastylc.com. Those would be the best ways.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Todd. It's great to have you and look forward to having you again.
Thanks for having me on, Rick. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.